The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. when I heard Vanessa's BMW purr into our driveway. I'd been lying awake for 3 hours, staring at the water stains on our bedroom ceiling that looked like accusatory fingers pointing down at me. My wife had been working late again, the 4th time this month at her precious startup where she played HR director like she was running the Pentagon. I'm Eli Graves, 38 years old, former English teacher turned rare book dealer in this godforsaken coastal Maine town where everyone knows your business before you do. I've got a sharp tongue, a sharper wit, and apparently a wife who thinks I'm too stupid to notice when she's screwing around. The front door creaked. She was trying to be quiet. How thoughtful. I heard her heels click across our hardwood floors, then the telltale sounds of someone trying to cover their tracks. Running water, the medicine cabinet opening and closing, the soft rustle of clothes being changed. When Vanessa finally slipped into bed, she reeked of cologne that definitely wasn't mine and guilt that was practically radioactive. Her perfume, the expensive stuff she only wore for special occasions, mixed with the scent of another man's aftershave, created a nauseating cocktail that made my stomach churn. "Good meeting?" I asked into the darkness, my voice casual as a loaded gun. She stiffened beside me. "What?" "Your meeting. Must have run pretty late." "Oh, yeah. You know how it is with the investors. They want everything perfect for the presentation next week." Funny thing about lies, they always sound rehearsed when you're expecting them. Vanessa's voice had that artificial brightness she used when she was performing, like she was addressing a room full of people instead of her husband of 12 years. I rolled over to face her silhouette in the dim light filtering through our curtains. "Investors, huh? That's interesting, considering your company doesn't have any investor meetings scheduled this month. I saw your calendar when you left it open on the kitchen counter." Even in the darkness, I could feel her panic. The air between us crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a butter knife. "Eli, Save it." I sat up, suddenly exhausted by the whole charade. "Just tell me who he is." The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, Vanessa switched on her bedside lamp, and I got a good look at her face. Her makeup was smudged, her lipstick gone, and her hair had that telltale must look that doesn't come from sitting in conference rooms. "I want an open relationship," she said, just like that. No preamble, no apology, no acknowledgement of the 12 years we'd spent building a life together. Just a cold, calculated statement delivered like she was announcing the weather. I stared at her, genuinely stunned. Not because she was cheating, I'd suspected that for weeks, but because she had the unmitigated gall to frame it as some kind of progressive lifestyle choice instead of what it really was. Betrayal, with a trendy label slapped on top. "An open relationship," I repeated slowly, tasting the words like they were poison. "How very modern of you." She had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. "We've been growing apart, Eli. We want different things. Maybe if we had the freedom to explore. So you won't mind if I ask your best friend Dani out on a date?" The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them, but the effect was immediate and devastating. Vanessa's face went white, then red, then white again. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't be serious." "Why not? Open relationship, right? Freedom to explore?" I leaned back against the headboard, suddenly enjoying myself. Dani's always been cute. Smart too, and she actually seems to like spending time with me, unlike some people I could mention. That's completely different. "How?" Because she's my best friend. And I'm your husband. Funny how that didn't stop you from whatever you were doing tonight." That's when I knew. She didn't want an open marriage. She just wanted out, but she was too much of a coward to ask for a divorce. She wanted me to be the bad guy, to storm out in a rage so she could play the victim to all our friends and family. Poor Vanessa, married to that unreasonable Eli who couldn't handle her need for personal growth. Well, two could play that game. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. "You know what? I think I will call Dani. She's probably still awake. She always was a night owl." "Eli, don't you dare!" But I was already scrolling through my contacts. Dani Foster had been Vanessa's best friend since college, a sharp-tongued paralegal with a wicked sense of humor and zero tolerance for bullshit. If anyone would appreciate the irony of the situation, it would be her. The phone rang twice before her voice came through, slightly groggy but alert. "Eli, what's wrong? It's almost 3 a.m. "Hey, Dani, sorry to wake you. I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner tomorrow night. Vanessa just informed me we're having an open relationship now, so I figured I'd test drive the concept." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, to my surprise, Dani started laughing. Not the polite chuckle you give when someone makes a bad joke, but genuine deep belly laughter that went on for a solid 30 seconds. "Oh my God," she finally gasped. "She actually said that? Open relationship? Direct quote. Jesus Christ, Eli. Yeah, I'll have dinner with you, and you're going to want to hear what I have to say. Leaving me staring at my phone with a growing sense that this conversation had just taken an unexpected turn. Beside me, Vanessa looked like she was about to vomit. What did she mean by that? She whispered. I set my phone back on the nightstand and turned off the lamp, plunging us back into darkness. Guess we'll find out tomorrow night. As I settled back into bed, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in months, I felt like I was holding the cards instead of being played by them. Vanessa lay rigid beside me, probably wondering what secrets her best friend might spill over dinner. She should be worried. In a town like ours, secrets have a way of bubbling to the surface like bodies in a lake. And something told me Dani Foster was about to become my new best friend. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, which seemed fitting for the collapse of my marriage. I made coffee for one and sat in my cluttered home office above our garage, surrounded by towers of rare books that had become my escape from Vanessa's increasingly toxic presence. The musty scent of old paper and leather bindings felt more comforting than my own bedroom these days. Vanessa had left early for work without a word, but not before I caught her frantically texting someone from the kitchen. The way she hunched over her phone, shielding the screen with her body, told me everything I needed to know. She was doing damage control, probably warning her mystery man about my conversation with Dani. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Dani. Meet me at the Wreck at 6. Come hungry for food and information. The Wreck was our local dive bar, the kind of place where fishermen and townies gathered to drink cheap beer and share expensive gossip. It sat on the waterfront like a barnacle on a pier, weathered and stubborn and absolutely essential to the ecosystem of our small town. If you wanted to know what was really happening in people's lives, you didn't read the newspaper. You bought Jessa the bartender a drink and listened. I spent the afternoon trying to focus on cataloging a collection of first edition Steinbecks, but my mind kept wandering to Vanessa's panicked expression when I'd mentioned Dani. There was something there, some layer of fear that went deeper than simple embarrassment. After 12 years of marriage, I knew my wife's tells, and last night she'd been terrified. At 5:30, I locked up the shop and walked the 3 blocks to the Wreck. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like wet seaweed and regret. I found Dani sitting in a corner booth, nursing a beer, and looking like she had something important to get off her chest. Danielle Foster was one of those women who improved with age, her auburn hair now streaked with silver that caught the light like copper wire. She had laugh lines around her green eyes and the kind of direct gaze that made politicians and used car salesmen nervous. Tonight, she looked like a woman with a story to tell. You look like hell, she said as I slid into the booth across from her. Thanks. You always know just what to say to make a guy feel special. Jessa appeared at our table like a ghost materializing from smoke. She was 60-something with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. What'll it be, Eli? Whatever's on tap and whatever Dani's having for dinner. Fish and chips for both of us, Dani said, and keep the beers coming. This is going to be a long conversation. When Jessa disappeared back to the bar, Dani leaned forward and lowered her voice. Before we get started, I need to know, how serious are you about this open relationship thing? Depends. How serious was Vanessa when she suggested it? Very serious. She's been planning this for months, Eli. The open relationship thing is just her way of keeping you on the hook while she figures out her exit strategy. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed by someone who knew Vanessa as well as I did made it real in a way that hurt more than I'd expected. Who is he? Dani's expression darkened. Brent Hogue. You know him? Owns that CrossFit gym downtown, drives the red Camaro, thinks he's God's gift to women over 30. I knew Brent by reputation, if not personally. He was one of those guys who never quite got over being the high school quarterback, even though he was pushing 40 and his glory days were 20 years behind him. He had the kind of aggressive charm that worked on insecure women and the emotional depth of a puddle. How long? I asked. 3 months, maybe 4. She started going to his gym after New Year's, said she wanted to get in shape. Next thing I know, she's working late 3 nights a week and asking me to cover for her if you call. And you did? Dani had the grace to look ashamed. At first, she's my best friend, or was. I thought maybe she was just going through some kind of midlife crisis thing. But then I started paying attention to what she was actually saying about you. Jessa returned with our food and fresh beers, giving us a knowing look that suggested she'd been eavesdropping. In a place like the Wreck, privacy was more of a suggestion than a rule. What kind of things? I asked when we were alone again. Cruel things. She'd complain about how boring you were, how you'd let yourself go, how she felt trapped in this end town with a man who had no ambition, She made it sound like you were some kind of anchor dragging her down. Each word was like a small knife between my ribs. I'd known our marriage was in trouble, but hearing that Vanessa had been systematically dismantling our relationship to justify her affair was worse than I'd imagined. But here's the thing, Dani continued, stabbing a French fry with more force than necessary. I've known you both for 15 years. You're not boring, Eli. You're one of the smartest, funniest men I know. And you haven't let yourself go. You look exactly the same as you did in college, just with better taste in books. Thanks, but I'm not finished. Vanessa is the one who's changed. She's become obsessed with status and image and keeping up with people who don't even like her. She's turned into someone I barely recognize, and frankly, someone I don't particularly want to be friends with anymore. I stared at her across the table, processing what she was telling me. So when you called last night, I saw an opportunity to help a friend and maybe teach another friend a lesson she desperately needs to learn. What kind of lesson? Dani smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression that reminded me why she was so good at her job. Paralegals didn't succeed by being nice. They succeeded by being thorough, relentless, and absolutely ruthless when the situation called for it. The kind that involves showing Vanessa exactly what she's throwing away, while simultaneously exposing Brent for the shallow, cheating piece of garbage he really is. He's cheating on Vanessa too? Oh, honey, Brent's cheating on everyone. His wife, his girlfriend, his personal trainer. The man collects women like baseball cards. Vanessa just thinks she's special because she's the one he's spending the most time with right now? I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Satisfaction because Vanessa was about to learn that her Prince Charming was actually a frog, and pity because I still cared enough about her to hate seeing her get hurt. So what did you have in mind? I asked. First, we let Vanessa think you're actually interested in me. Let her stew in her own jealousy for a while. Then, we start gathering information about Brent's other activities. Trust me, a guy like that always has skeletons in his closet. What kind of skeletons? The kind that would make his wife very interested in a divorce lawyer, and his business partners very interested in finding new investments. I was starting to see where this was going, and I had to admit, I liked it. Instead of playing the wounded husband, I'd play the game better than Vanessa ever could. Instead of letting her control the narrative, I'd write my own ending. There's something else, Dani said, her voice dropping even lower. Something I probably should have told you months ago. What? Vanessa's been bad-mouthing you to everyone who'll listen. She's been setting up this whole victim narrative where you're the controlling husband who won't let her grow as a person. Half our friends already think you're some kind of emotional abuser. The color drained from my face. This wasn't just about an affair. This was a full-scale character assassination that I hadn't anticipated. Vanessa wasn't just cheating on me. She was methodically destroying my reputation to make her betrayal appear justified. Who believes her? More people than I'd like to admit. Tom and Jennifer from book club, the Hendersons from down the street, even some of the guys from your poker game. She's very convincing when she wants to be. I sat back in the booth, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was war. And apparently, I'd been fighting with one hand tied behind my back while my opponent was using brass knuckles. So what do we do about it? Dani reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We show everyone who Vanessa really is, and we make sure Brent goes down with her. As if summoned by our conversation, the door to the wreck opened, and in walked the man himself. Brent Hogue was exactly what you'd expect from a guy who owned a gym and drove a muscle car, all chest and shoulders with the kind of tan that came from a bottle and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He scanned the room like he owned it, his gaze lingering on the handful of women scattered throughout the bar. When his eyes landed on our table, his expression shifted from casual arrogance to something harder. Well, well, he said, sauntering over with the kind of swagger that made me want to punch him on principle. If it isn't Eli Graves. Heard you and the missus are exploring new horizons. The way he said it, with that smug little smile playing around his lips, made it clear that Vanessa had already filled him in on our conversation, but there was something else in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty when he looked at Dani. Brent, I said pleasantly, not bothering to stand. Funny running into you here. I was just telling Dani about Vanessa's sudden interest in fitness. His smile faltered slightly. Yeah, she's been working real hard. Very dedicated. I bet she is. Must be nice having such an attentive trainer. The subtext was clear to everyone within earshot, which in a place like the wreck meant pretty much everyone. I could see Jessa behind the bar, polishing glasses with unusual intensity while she listened to every word. Well, Brent said, his voice a little tighter than before, I should let you two get back to your dinner. Actually, Dani spoke up for the first time, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "We were just talking about you." Brent's face went through several interesting color changes. "Is that right?" I was telling Eli about that conversation we had at Sarah Mitchell's birthday party. You remember? The one where you were complaining about your wife's spending habits while you bought drinks for that blonde from the bank? Now Brent looked genuinely uncomfortable. His eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an escape route, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out how much Dani actually knew. "I think you might be confused about..." "Am I? Because I have a pretty good memory for details. Occupational hazard." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Brent was smart enough to know when he was outgunned, even if he wasn't smart enough to avoid the situation in the first place. "Right. Well, I should probably get going. Early morning tomorrow." He beat a hasty retreat, but not before shooting me a look that promised this conversation wasn't over. I watched him leave, noting the way he pulled out his phone before he even reached his car. "He's calling Vanessa," I said. "Good. Let him. The more panicked they get, the more mistakes they'll make." Dani was right. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was holding the cards instead of being played by them. Vanessa wanted an open relationship? Fine. But she was about to learn that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Vanessa, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages that read like the manifesto of a woman losing her grip on reality. Apparently, Brent had given her a detailed report of our encounter at the wreck, and she was not handling it well. "We need to talk," read the most recent message, sent at 6:47 a.m. "This has gone too far." I made coffee, fed our elderly tabby cat Mr. Dickens, and took my time getting ready for the day. Let her sweat. She'd kept me waiting for months while she carried on with her affair. A few hours of uncertainty wouldn't hurt her. Around 10, I finally called her back. "Where have you been?" she demanded, skipping right past hello and diving straight into accusation mode. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I was sleeping. You know, that thing people do at night when they're not out having clandestine meetings with their personal trainers." "Don't be cute, Eli. We need to talk about last night." "What about it?" "I had dinner with a friend. I thought that was allowed under our new arrangement." The silence on the other end of the line was so complete I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally she spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "Dani is my best friend. And I'm your husband. Funny how that didn't factor into your decision-making process." "That's completely different." "How?" Another silence, longer this time. I could practically hear her scrambling for justification, some way to make her behavior seem reasonable while condemning mine. "Because what I'm doing is honest. I told you about wanting an open relationship instead of sneaking around behind your back." The sheer audacity of that statement left me speechless for a moment. She'd been sneaking around for months, lying to my face, enlisting our friends to cover for her, and systematically destroying my reputation. But apparently, a single conversation made all of that honest. "Right," I said. "Very ethical of you. I'm sure Emily Post has a whole chapter on the proper etiquette for announcing your affairs." "It's not an affair if we're in an open relationship. Except we weren't in an open relationship when you started screwing Brent Hogue. We weren't in an open relationship when you asked Dani to lie for you. And we sure as hell weren't in an open relationship when you started telling everyone in town what a terrible husband I am." That last part hit home. I could hear her sharp intake of breath, the little gasp she made when she realized she'd been caught. "I never..." "Save it, Vanessa. I know exactly what you've been saying about me, and to whom. The question now is what we're going to do about it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you opened this door, sweetheart. Now you get to see what's on the other side." I hung up before she could respond, feeling better than I had in months. Phase 1 of Dani's plan was working perfectly. Vanessa was rattled, off balance, and making emotional decisions instead of calculated ones. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I ignored it. Instead, I called Dani. "How'd she take it?" she asked without preamble. "About as well as you'd expect. She's in full panic mode." "Good. That means she's vulnerable. You ready for Phase 2? "What's Phase 2? "The town festival is this weekend. Everyone will be there, including Brent and his wife. I think it's time for a little public theater." The annual Founders' Day Festival was one of those small-town traditions that brought out the best and worst in people. There would be craft booths and food trucks, live music, and enough gossip to fuel the rumor mill for months. It was the perfect stage for the kind of drama Dani had in mind. "What did you have in mind?" "Meet me there Saturday afternoon. Wear something nice. We're going to give this town something to talk about." Saturday dawned bright and clear. One of those perfect Maine days that made you forget about the long, brutal winters and the mud season that preceded them. I put on my best shirt and actually combed my hair, feeling like an actor preparing for the performance of his life. The festival was set up in the high school parking lot and surrounding fields, with white tents and colorful banners creating a festive atmosphere that belied the drama about to unfold. I found Dani by the book sale booth, looking stunning in a blue sundress that brought out her eyes and turned heads as she moved through the crowd. "You clean up nice," she said, linking her arm through mine in a gesture that was casual but unmistakably intimate. "So do you. Think anyone's noticed?" "Oh, they've noticed." Mrs. Henderson practically dropped her funnel cake when she saw us together. We strolled through the festival like a couple, stopping to chat with vendors and friends, accepting compliments on how good we looked together with gracious smiles and meaningful glances. It was all very innocent on the surface, but the subtext was clear to anyone paying attention. Eli Graves was moving on, and he was moving on with his wife's best friend. The reaction was everything we could have hoped for. I watched the whispered conversations that followed in our wake, saw the way people's eyes widened when they realized what they were seeing. In a town our size, this was front-page news. We were examining some handmade pottery when I spotted them, Vanessa and Brent, standing by the beer tent with expressions that could have curdled milk. Vanessa looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Brent looked angry, his jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists. "Showtime," Dani murmured. We made our way toward them, stopping frequently to greet friends and neighbors. Each interaction was a small performance, designed to showcase how happy and relaxed we were together. By the time we reached the beer tent, we had an audience. "Vanessa!" Dani called out brightly. "You look tired. Everything okay?" My wife's face went through several interesting color changes. She was trapped between her public persona, the successful, confident woman who had everything under control, and her private reality of panic and desperation. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Just working hard." "I'm sure you are," I said pleasantly. "All those late nights must be exhausting." Brent stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a rooster protecting his territory. "Maybe we should take this somewhere private." "Why?" Dani asked innocently. "We're all friends here. Well, mostly." The crowd around us had grown, drawn by the unmistakable scent of drama. I recognized faces from around town, the postmaster, the librarian, 3 members of the city council, and at least half of Vanessa's book club. Whatever happened next would be all over town by evening. "Look," Brent said, his voice carrying that edge of aggression that men like him used when they felt threatened. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but—" "Game?" I interrupted. "There's no game, Brent. Vanessa wanted an open relationship, so we're having an open relationship. I'm just following her lead." "That's not what she meant, and you know it." "Actually, I don't know it. She was very clear about wanting the freedom to explore other relationships. I'm just exercising the same freedom." The crowd was eating it up. I could see phones coming out, people positioning themselves to get better views of the confrontation. This was better than cable television. Vanessa finally found her voice. "Eli, please, can we discuss this privately?" "Why?" "You didn't seem concerned about privacy when you were discussing our marriage with half the town. Turnabout is fair play, don't you think?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the months of lies, the character assassination, the systematic destruction of everything we'd built together. Brent, apparently deciding that words weren't getting him anywhere, took a step toward me. "You need to back off, man. This is between you and your wife. Actually, it became your business the moment you decided to sleep with her." The crowd gasped, literally gasped, like we were in some kind of soap opera. Brent's face turned red, then purple, and I could see him struggling with the decision of whether to hit me in front of 50 witnesses. "You want to take a swing at me, Brent?" I asked conversationally. "Right here in front of everyone? I'm sure your wife would love to hear about that." That stopped him cold. His wife was somewhere in the crowd. I'd seen her earlier by the craft booths, and the last thing he needed was for this confrontation to escalate into violence with her watching. "This isn't over," he said, but the fight had gone out of him. "You're right," I agreed. "It's just getting started." Dani and I walked away arm in arm, leaving Vanessa and Brent to face the stares and whispers of the crowd. It was a masterful performance, if I did say so myself. We'd managed to publicly humiliate them without saying anything technically untrue or legally actionable. "That was beautiful," Dani said as we made our way to the parking area. "Did you see Vanessa's face when you mentioned her discussing your marriage with half the town?" "I saw it. I also saw Mrs. Patterson recording the whole thing on her phone." Even better. By tonight, everyone in town will know exactly what's been going on. We were almost to my car when I heard footsteps behind us, moving fast. I turned just in time to see Brent approaching at a near run, his face twisted with rage and embarrassment. "I said this wasn't over," he shouted. He was reaching for me when he tripped over his own feet and went down hard, sprawling across the gravel parking lot in front of a dozen witnesses. It would have been comical if it hadn't been so pathetic. I looked down at him with what I hoped was an expression of mild concern. "You okay there, Brent? Maybe you should work on your coordination before you worry about other people's marriages." The laughter from the crowd was the final nail in his coffin. He picked himself up, covered in dust and humiliation, and stalked away without another word. "Think that'll teach him?" Dani asked. "Probably not, but it'll sure make him think twice about confronting me in public again." As we drove away from the festival, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. For the first time since this whole mess began, I wasn't just reacting to Vanessa's moves, I was making moves of my own, and if today was any indication, I was better at this game than she was. The war was far from over, but I'd just won my first battle, and it felt damn good. Sunday morning brought a reckoning in the form of my mother-in-law calling at 7 a.m., her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Eli, what in God's name is going on? I just got off the phone with Patricia Henderson, and she's telling me the most ridiculous story about you and Dani Foster making a spectacle of yourselves at the festival." I poured myself coffee and settled in for what promised to be an interesting conversation. Margaret Winters had never particularly liked me, but she'd tolerated me for Vanessa's sake. Now apparently the gloves were coming off. "Good morning, Margaret. Lovely to hear from you, too." "Don't you take that tone with me, young man. Patricia says you were practically pawing that woman in front of the entire town while my daughter stood there humiliated." "Your daughter wasn't humiliated by anything I did. She was humiliated by her own choices." "What's that supposed to mean?" I took a long sip of coffee, savoring the moment. Margaret Winters was one of those women who thought she could bulldoze her way through any situation with righteous indignation and a loud voice. She was about to learn otherwise. "It means Vanessa asked for an open marriage, and I'm giving her exactly what she asked for. If she doesn't like the results, maybe she should have thought it through more carefully." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Margaret found her voice again, though it was considerably smaller than before. "An open marriage? That's ridiculous. Vanessa would never. Ask her yourself. Better yet, ask her about Brent Hogue while you're at it." Another silence, longer this time. I could practically hear the wheels turning in Margaret's head as she processed this information. "I don't believe you." "Then don't, but maybe you should wonder why your daughter hasn't called to give you her version of events." I finished my coffee in peace, wondering how long it would take Margaret to call Vanessa and demand an explanation. Not long, I suspected. I was right. My phone rang 20 minutes later. "What did you tell my mother?" Vanessa's voice was raw, like she'd been crying. "The truth. Novel concept, I know. She's threatening to come up here and sort this mess out herself. Do you know what that means?" I did know what that meant. Margaret Winters descending on our small town like an avenging angel, armed with opinions and a complete inability to mind her own business. It would be a disaster for everyone involved, but especially for Vanessa, who'd spent years carefully crafting her image as the perfect daughter. "Sounds like you have a problem." "We have a problem, Eli. She's my mother, but she'll make both our lives hell if she gets involved." "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to blow up our marriage." "I didn't blow up anything. I was trying to be honest about what I needed." "What you needed was to have your cake and eat it too. What you got was consequences." I hung up and turned off my phone. Let her stew in her own juices for a while. I had work to do. My rare bookshop occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house on Main Street, its windows filled with carefully arranged displays of leather-bound classics and local curiosities. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I could lose myself in the musty smell of old paper and the quiet satisfaction of connecting readers with books they'd treasure forever. I was cataloging a collection of first-edition mysteries when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Owen Mitchell, Vanessa's younger brother, standing in the doorway with an expression I couldn't quite read. Owen was the anti-Vanessa in almost every way, quiet where she was loud, thoughtful where she was impulsive, genuine where she was calculating. He worked for the city planning department and lived alone in a small apartment above the hardware store, content with his books and his garden and his Friday night poker games. "Hey, Eli, got a minute?" "For you? Always. What's on your mind?" He closed the door behind him and flipped the sign to closed, which immediately put me on alert. Owen wasn't the type for dramatic gestures. "I heard about yesterday, the festival." I figured you would. News travels fast in this town. It does, and so do lies. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. Vanessa's been telling people you're emotionally abusive, that you control the finances, isolate her from her friends, make her account for every minute of her time. I stared at him, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. And you believe that? Hell no. I've known you for 15 years, Eli. You're a lot of things, but you're not abusive. If anything, you've been too patient with her crap. He set the envelope on my counter with the careful precision of a man handling dynamite. What's in there? Evidence, text messages, emails, phone records. Vanessa's been planning this for months, maybe longer. The open relationship thing was just her exit strategy. She wanted to make you look like the bad guy so she could justify leaving. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The first document was a printout of text messages between Vanessa and Brent, dated 3 weeks before our bedroom confrontation. They were explicit, graphic, and left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. But it was the emotional content that really gut-punched me. He's getting suspicious, Vanessa had written. We need to be more careful. Or you could just leave him, Brent had replied. You said yourself he's holding you back. It's not that simple. I need to make it look like his idea or his fault. Otherwise, I'll look like the bad guy. So make him the bad guy. You're good at that. I flipped through more pages. Emails to her lawyer about divorce proceedings, searches for apartments in Portland, even a consultation with a private investigator about documenting emotional abuse. Where did you get this? Owen's smile was grim. Vanessa's not as careful with her passwords as she thinks she is. And she forgot that I work for the city. I have access to a lot of records that most people don't. Why are you showing me this? Because she's my sister, but she's wrong. And because you're a good man who doesn't deserve to have his life destroyed by her ambition. I sat down heavily in my desk chair, overwhelmed by the scope of Vanessa's deception. This wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated campaign to destroy my reputation and steal everything we'd built together. There's more, Owen said quietly. Brent's not just cheating on his wife, he's been running some kind of side business, using the gym as a front. I'm not sure what exactly, but there's money moving through accounts that don't match the business income. What kind of money? The kind that would interest the IRS, and possibly the police. I looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that I'd never noticed before. Owen Mitchell wasn't just the quiet, bookish city employee everyone thought he was. There was steel under that mild exterior, and right now it was focused on protecting me from his own sister. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you think is right. But Eli, don't let her destroy you. You're worth 10 of her, and it's time everyone knew it. He left me alone with the envelope and its devastating contents, my mind racing with possibilities. Vanessa had wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten that I was smarter than her, more patient than her, and now I had ammunition she didn't know existed. I spent the next hour reading through everything Owen had given me, my anger building with each page. The scope of Vanessa's betrayal was breathtaking. She'd been systematically destroying our marriage while planning her escape, all while positioning herself as the victim of my supposed abuse. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me, and now I had the tools to fight back. My phone buzzed with a text from Dani. Coffee tomorrow? I have news. I texted back, my place, 10 a.m., I have news too. As I locked up the shop and walked home through the gathering dusk, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. For the first time since this whole mess began, I wasn't just reacting to Vanessa's moves. I was 3 steps ahead of her. She wanted a war, she was about to get one. But it wouldn't be fought on her terms anymore. It would be fought on mine. Dani arrived at my house the next morning carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd spent the night planning something devious. She settled into my kitchen chair like a general preparing for battle, her green eyes bright with anticipation. You look like the cat that ate the canary, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Better. I look like the cat that's about to eat the canary, the mouse, and half the neighborhood. She pulled out her phone and set it on the table between us. I had a very interesting conversation with Brent's wife yesterday evening. Sandra? How did that come about? I may have accidentally run into her at the grocery store, and I may have accidentally mentioned that her husband seemed very cozy with a certain someone at the festival. I raised an eyebrow. Accidentally? Completely by accident. Just like it was an accident that I happened to have photos from the festival on my phone, including several of Brent and Vanessa looking very intimate by the beer tent. The woman was diabolical, and I was beginning to appreciate just how dangerous she could be when motivated. How did Sandra take it? About as well as I would expect. Turns out she suspected something for months, but couldn't prove it. She was very grateful for the confirmation. And? Dani's smile turned predatory, and she's filing for divorce. Today, with a very good lawyer who specializes in taking cheating husbands to the cleaners. That was good news, but I could tell there was more. Dani had that look she got when she was holding the best cards in her hand. There's something else, she continued. Sandra told me some very interesting things about Brent's business practices. Apparently, he's been using the gym's books to hide income from some side ventures that Sandra was never quite clear about. What kind of side ventures? The kind that involve a lot of cash and very little paperwork. Sandra thinks he might be laundering money for someone, but she's never been able to prove it. I thought about Owen's information from the day before, the mysterious money movements that didn't match the gym's legitimate income. The pieces were starting to fit together in a very ugly picture. Speaking of interesting information, I said, reaching for the manila envelope Owen had given me. You're going to want to see this. I spread the documents across the kitchen table like a poker player revealing a royal flush. Dani's eyes widened as she read through the text messages, emails, and financial records. Holy shit, Eli, she's been planning this for months. Gets better. Look at this. I showed her the consultation with the private investigator, the apartment searches, the draft divorce papers that painted me as an emotionally abusive control freak. This is character assassination on an industrial scale, Dani said, her voice tight with anger. She wasn't just cheating on you, she was setting you up to take the fall for everything. The question is, what do we do about it? Dani leaned back in her chair, her mind clearly working through possibilities. We need to be smart about this. If we just dump everything at once, it'll look like revenge. We need to let Vanessa hang herself with her own rope. What did you have in mind? A trap? Something that exposes both of them publicly, in a way that can't be dismissed or explained away. She outlined her plan, and I had to admit it was brilliant in its simplicity. We would use Vanessa's own tactics against her, letting her think she was winning right up until the moment we pulled the rug out from under her. It's risky, I said when she finished. The best plans always are. But think about it, Eli. Right now, half the town thinks you're an abusive husband and Vanessa's the victim. We need to flip that narrative completely, and the only way to do it is with overwhelming evidence that can't be denied or spun. She was right. Half measures wouldn't work against someone as manipulative as Vanessa. We needed something decisive, something that would end this war once and for all. When? This weekend. The Hendersons are having their annual barbecue and everyone will be there. It's the perfect venue for maximum impact. The Henderson barbecue was a local institution, one of those events that brought together everyone who mattered in our small town. Politicians, business owners, social leaders, they'd all be there, along with their spouses and their gossip and their smartphones ready to record whatever drama unfolded. What do you need from me? Just follow my lead and trust me. Can you do that? I looked across the table at this woman who'd become my unlikely ally, this sharp-tongued paralegal who'd decided to go to war against her own best friend on my behalf. There was something almost frightening about the intelligence in her eyes, the careful way she'd planned every move in this elaborate chess game. Why are you doing this, Dani? Really? She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her coffee cup. When she looked up, her expression was softer than I'd seen it since this whole thing began. Because 15 years ago, when I was going through my own messy divorce, you and Vanessa were the only people who stood by me. Everyone else in this town treated me like a pariah, like divorce was contagious. But you two invited me to dinner every week, included me in your plans, made sure I didn't spend the holidays alone. She paused, her voice getting stronger. You did that, Eli. Not Vanessa. She went along with it, but it was your idea. You saw someone who was hurting and you helped. No questions asked, no judgment. That's who you are. And Vanessa? Vanessa's become someone who destroys people to get what she wants. She's not the woman I became friends with in college, and she's sure as hell not the woman who deserves someone like you. I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth I hadn't experienced in months. For so long, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if maybe Vanessa was right. Maybe I was the problem. But Dani saw something in me worth fighting for, worth risking a friendship to protect. Okay, I said. Let's do it. We spent the next hour refining the plan, working out timing and contingencies and backup strategies. By the time Dani left, we had a blueprint for Vanessa's destruction that was both elegant and devastating. I spent the rest of the week preparing, gathering additional evidence, making phone calls, setting the stage for what would either be my vindication or my complete humiliation. There was no middle ground. Either this would work perfectly or it would backfire spectacularly. Friday evening, Vanessa came home early for the first time in weeks. She found me in the kitchen, cooking dinner like everything was normal. "We need to talk," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Do we? I thought we'd said everything that needed saying." "Eli, this has gone too far. The whole town is talking about us, and it's affecting my work. My boss called me into his office today to ask if there were any personal issues that might impact my performance." I turned from the stove to look at her, really look at her, for the first time in weeks. She looked exhausted, her usually perfect appearance showing cracks around the edges. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her clothes looked like she'd slept in them. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him everything was fine, but Eli, it's not fine. This thing with Dani, this public spectacle you're making, it has to stop." "Why?" "Because it's inconvenient for you. Because it's destroying both our reputations." I laughed, actually laughed, at the sheer audacity of that statement. "My reputation was destroyed months ago, Vanessa. You made sure of that when you started telling everyone what a terrible husband I am." Her face went white. "I never. Save it. I know exactly what you've been saying, and to whom. I also know about the private investigator, the apartment hunting, and the divorce papers you've already had drafted." She staggered backward like I'd slapped her, her hand going to her throat in a gesture of pure panic. "How did you find out? Turns out I'm not as stupid as you thought. Turns out I have friends, too, people who actually give a damn about what happens to me." "Eli, please, let me explain." "Explain what? How you've been systematically destroying our marriage while positioning yourself as the victim? How you've been planning your escape for months while lying to my face every single day?" Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but they looked calculated somehow, like she was performing grief rather than feeling it. "I was scared," she whispered. "I felt trapped, and I didn't know how to tell you I wasn't happy." "So you decided to have an affair and blame me for it?" "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Brent was just supposed to be a friend, someone to talk to." "Bullshit. I've seen the text messages, Vanessa. I know exactly what Brent was supposed to be." She crumpled then, sinking into a kitchen chair with her head in her hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice muffled by her hands. "I want you to stop lying. I want you to stop trying to destroy my reputation to make yourself feel better about your choices. And I want you to face the consequences of what you've done." "What consequences?" I turned back to the stove, stirring the pasta sauce with deliberate calm. "I guess you'll find out tomorrow night at the Hendersons' party." "What's tomorrow night?" "The end of the story, Vanessa, one way or another." She left the kitchen without another word, and I heard her car pull out of the driveway a few minutes later. Probably going to warn Brent, probably trying to figure out what I knew and how I knew it. It didn't matter. By tomorrow night, everyone would know everything, and there would be nowhere left to hide. I finished cooking dinner and ate alone, savoring both the food and the anticipation. After months of playing defense, I was finally ready to go on the attack, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made outdoor parties magical. Warm air, gentle breeze, and a sky painted in shades of pink and gold that would have made a greeting card photographer weep with joy. The Hendersons' backyard was already packed with what looked like half the town when Dani and I arrived fashionably late, arm in arm, dressed like we were attending a wedding instead of a neighborhood barbecue. "You ready for this?" Dani whispered as we approached the gate. "I've been ready for months." The party was everything I'd expected. Clusters of people holding drinks and conversations, children running between the adults with the kind of boundless energy that made me tired just watching them, and the smell of grilled meat mixing with perfume and anticipation. But there was an undercurrent of tension in the air, the kind that suggested everyone knew something dramatic was about to happen. We made our entrance slowly, stopping to chat with friends and neighbors, accepting compliments on how good we looked together with gracious smiles and meaningful glances. I could feel eyes following us, conversations pausing as we passed, the weight of collective attention that meant our performance was having the desired effect. "There they are," Dani murmured, nodding toward the far corner of the yard. Vanessa and Brent stood near the dessert table, trying to look casual but failing miserably. Vanessa kept glancing around nervously, while Brent had the aggressive posture of a man expecting trouble. They looked like criminals waiting for the police to show up. "Let's go say hello," I suggested. We worked our way across the yard, stopping frequently to greet people, building anticipation with every step. By the time we reached them, we had accumulated an audience of at least 20 people, all pretending to focus on their conversations while actually watching us. "Vanessa," Dani called out brightly. "You look tense. Everything okay?" My wife's face went through several striking color changes. She was caught between her public image and her private fear, struggling to keep her composure while clearly falling apart inside. "Everything's fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Just enjoying the party." "Wonderful. And Brent, how's the gym business? I heard you've been diversifying lately." Brent's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, just some things Sandra mentioned. You remember Sandra, right? Your wife?" The crowd around us had grown, drawn by the unmistakable scent of drama. I recognized faces from around town, the mayor, several city council members, Vanessa's boss from the startup, and most importantly, Mrs. Patterson with her ever-present smartphone already recording. "Look," Brent said, his voice carrying that edge of aggression that men like him used when they felt cornered. "I don't know what game you people think you're playing." "No game," I interrupted pleasantly. "Just a conversation among friends. Speaking of which, Vanessa, I wanted to thank you for being so honest about wanting an open relationship. It's really opened my eyes to a lot of things." Her face went white. "Eli, please." "Please what? Please don't mention how you've been planning to leave me for months? Please don't talk about the private investigator you hired to document my supposed abuse? Please don't bring up the apartment you've already put a deposit on in Portland?" The crowd gasped, literally gasped, as the implications of what I was saying sank in. Phones came out, people positioned themselves for better views, and the energy in the air shifted from anticipation to shock. "That's not... I never..." Vanessa stammered. "Oh, but you did." Dani pulled out her phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. "Would you like me to read some of your text messages to Brent? There are some particularly interesting ones about making Eli look like the bad guy." Brent stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You can't just..." "Can't what? Share information that was freely given to us? Sandra was very helpful when she decided to clean out your home office before filing for divorce." That stopped him cold. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I could see him trying to process the implications of what Dani had just said. "Divorce?" Vanessa whispered. "Oh, yes," Dani continued cheerfully. "Sandra's filing on Monday. Apparently she's known about your little affair for weeks, but she wanted to make sure she had all her ducks in a row first. Turns out she's been documenting everything, bank records, phone bills, even some very interesting information about your side businesses." The color drained from Brent's face. "What side businesses?" "The ones the IRS is going to be very interested in hearing about. Cash transactions, unreported income, money laundering through the gym's accounts. Sandra kept meticulous records." Brent looked like he was about to be sick. The crowd around us had grown to include most of the party, and I could see people recording everything, posting to social media, sharing the drama in real time with anyone who wasn't lucky enough to be here in person. "This is insane," Vanessa said, her voice rising with desperation. "You can't just destroy people's lives because you're angry." "Destroy lives?" I laughed, actually laughed at the sheer audacity of that statement. "Vanessa, you spent months systematically destroying my reputation, telling anyone who would listen that I was an abusive, controlling husband. You enlisted our friends to lie for you, you planned to take half of everything I've worked for, and you were going to leave me holding the bag for your boyfriend's illegal business activities." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Owen Mitchell stepped out of the crowd, holding a thick folder. "Because I have documentation that says otherwise." Vanessa stared at her brother in shock and betrayal. "Owen, what are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago. Protecting someone who doesn't deserve what you've been doing to him." He opened the folder and began reading from the documents inside. Text messages between Vanessa and Brent, emails to her lawyer, searches for apartments, even the consultation with the private investigator. Each revelation was like a nail in the coffin of her public image. The crowd was eating it up. I could see the shock and disgust on people's faces as they realized the scope of Vanessa's deception, the calculated cruelty of what she'd been planning. The woman they'd thought was a victim was actually the architect of an elaborate scheme to destroy an innocent man. "Stop," Vanessa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please, just stop." But Owen wasn't finished. "There's more. Financial records showing that Brent's been using Vanessa's position at the startup to get information about potential investors, information he's been selling to competitors." Vanessa's boss, who'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, stepped forward with an expression of pure fury. "Is this true?" I didn't know." "She knew," Brent said suddenly, apparently deciding that if he was going down, he wasn't going alone. "She's the one who suggested it. Said her company was full of idiots with more money than sense." The betrayal was swift and complete. Vanessa stared at Brent in shock. realizing that the man she'd destroyed her marriage for was now throwing her under the bus to save himself. "You bastard," she whispered. "Takes one to know one," he shot back. The crowd was in full feeding frenzy mode now, phones recording every word, every expression, every moment of this spectacular public meltdown. This wasn't just the end of Vanessa's marriage. It was the end of her career, her reputation, her entire life in this town. "I think we've heard enough," the mayor said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who just witnessed a crime. "Brent, I suggest you contact a lawyer. Vanessa, you might want to do the same." The crowd began to disperse, people breaking off into smaller groups to discuss what they'd just witnessed. I could already see the social media posts being composed, the phone calls being made, the gossip network activating to spread this story to every corner of our small town. Vanessa stood alone in the middle of it all, abandoned by her lover, exposed by her brother, destroyed by her own choices. She looked at me with something that might have been pleading in her eyes. "Eli, Save it, Vanessa. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences." I turned to leave. Dani's arm linked through mine, but Vanessa's voice stopped me. "How can you do this to me? I'm your wife." I looked back at her one last time. This woman I'd loved for 12 years, this stranger who'd tried to destroy me to get what she wanted. "No," I said quietly. "You're the woman who used to be my wife. There's a difference." Dani and I walked away together, leaving Vanessa to face the wreckage of her own making. Behind us, I could hear her sobbing, could hear Brent arguing with someone on his phone, could hear the excited chatter of a crowd that had just witnessed the social event of the year. "Feel better?" Dani asked as we reached the gate. "You know what? I actually do." We drove to the wreck where Jessa was waiting with drinks and a knowing smile. The bar was already buzzing with people who'd heard about the confrontation, and within an hour, it seemed like half the town had shown up to rehash every detail of Vanessa's spectacular fall from grace. "To justice," Dani said, raising her glass. "To justice," I agreed. As the night wore on and the stories got more elaborate with each telling, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was over, and I'd won decisively. Vanessa's reputation was in ruins. Brent was facing legal and financial disaster, and everyone in town now knew exactly who the real victim had been. It was better than I'd dared to hope for, more complete than I'd thought possible. Vanessa had wanted to destroy me to get what she wanted, but in the end, she'd only succeeded in destroying herself. The last I heard, she'd packed her things and left town that very night, unable to face the shame and humiliation of what she'd brought on herself. Brent followed a few days later, after the IRS showed up at his gym with a warrant and several boxes. I never saw either of them again, and I was perfectly fine with that. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same booth at the wreck, sharing a drink with Dani and laughing about something ridiculous when she looked at me with those green eyes and asked, "So what now?" "Now?" I considered the question, looking around at the familiar faces of people who'd stood by me when it mattered, who'd seen through Vanessa's lies and supported me when I needed it most. Now we see what happens next. "Think you might be ready for a real relationship someday? With someone who actually deserves you?" I looked across the table at this remarkable woman who'd gone to war for me, who'd risked everything to help me fight back against people who'd tried to destroy me. There was something in her eyes, something that suggested this conversation was about more than hypotheticals. "With the right person," I said carefully. "Someone who's proven they can be trusted when things get tough." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a long, brutal winter. "I might know someone like that." "Yeah? Tell me about her." But that, as they say, is another story entirely.